Good evening, everyone. I am super excited to welcome you to our first meeting for Grace's Girls. So we're just going to get started, and whoever else is joining can catch up as we go. So just to introduce myself, my name is Anique Smith, and I am one of the founders of this initiative. My co-founder is Letitia Castles, and you'll meet her a little bit later on. I just want to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for you to watch again later. So before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'd like to take a moment to explain how the idea of Grace's Girls came about so that you can understand the background of this initiative. So I studied BIS Multimedia here at the University of Pretoria, starting in 2011. And during my undergraduate degree, I began noticing that I was in the minority group in terms of gender. Most of the time, this didn't really bother me, but there were times when I distinctly felt like an outsider in a masculine environment. And I knew that once I entered the working world, this gap would become even clearer. The gender gap, the gender gap exists worldwide in many different sectors, but it is particularly pronounced in the tech industry. In 2018, 19% of tech-related jobs at the top 10 global tech companies were held by women. And in terms of leadership positions at these companies, only 28% of them were made up of women. According to the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report, gender gaps are more likely in fields that require disruptive technical skills, such as full stack development, AI, and cloud computing, basically anything that you would go into in the tech industry. And when we look at higher education, we see the same pattern. In South Africa in 2018, on average, 2 women graduated from ICT-related degrees for every 5 men. Improving the ratio of women to men in the tech industry is not just about fighting for equality, but it's also about recognizing that women bring different ways of thinking to a situation, and that these perspectives can help improve the way that we think about and design technology for the future. If the demographic makeup of a company is completely homogeneous, then it makes their products vulnerable to bias. Many different studies have been conducted on determining the reasons why fewer women are interested in tech-related degrees and careers. Among other things, confidence or a belief in their own ability to succeed is generally lower in women. This means that they tend to underestimate their skills in math and programming, which results in them being less likely to flourish in these areas. In addition, female students have been shown to be more likely than male students to take test results as an indicator of their abilities and their mastery of a subject. And this means that if they perform below their own expectations, they are more likely to drop the course. Another contributing factor is the lack of female role models in the field. Studies have shown that seeing female leaders changes people's perceptions and makes women more confident that they can also serve in leadership positions. For example, when female leaders were introduced in a village in India, the probability that women would speak up in community meetings increased by 25%. In addition, community members began to rate female and male leaders equally, and parents became more likely to encourage their daughters to pursue tertiary education. So this all brings me to the reason for Grace's Girls. About 18 months ago, the gender gap in tech degrees at the University of Pretoria began to stand out clearly to me. I started to wonder how I could use the little bit of influence that I have in my position as a lecturer to encourage women to continue pursuing their degrees and enter the industry. After some conversations with Letitia, the idea of Grace's Girls was born. We both felt strongly that making female leaders in the industry more prominent to students would help break through the cultural stereotype of men being better at tech and show students what is possible for women in the field. Now, we fully recognize that this is a small solution to a larger problem, but we are eager to do what we can to help bring about change. It's our hope that these meetings expose you to new ideas and ways of viewing the industry, as well as your own degrees. And that through these meetings, you would gain confidence in your abilities and your unique perspective, and gain resilience to continue in the field. So I want to end by welcoming you once again. I want to thank you for partnering with us in taking this first step towards bridging the gender gap in tech. We are really excited to see where this goes. So with that, I feel privileged to introduce our first speaker, Eleanor Harding. I know Eleanor from undergraduate multimedia days when we studied together. Since then, she's gone on to do some amazing things in the industry, including participating in and winning multiple hackathons, working with NASA, and now being a senior product developer at Twitter in London. Eleanor, it really is such a pleasure to welcome you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us tonight.
Thanks, Anik. Thanks so much for the intro. Hello, everybody. I'm really excited that I get to spend some time with you all this evening, and I am such a huge fan, Anik, of this initiative that you've set up, and really excited to see what happens here. I feel like you were speaking into my soul with that intro now of a lot of those stats, and I also share your experiences of doing multimedia. Anik and I studied together, graduated in 2014. I am gonna share some stories and some ideas with you today. Feel free to drop stuff in the chat while I'm going, or unmute yourself if you want to ask any questions at any time. I think we're a small enough group that we can have some nice conversations together. I'm gonna do a bit of a presentation, but I'm only gonna do slides like halfway through. So at some point I'm gonna present from my computer just over here. I'll let you know when that happens. So we'll start without any slides. So one of my favorite things in the whole world is to take an idea and turn it into this really elegant product that helps people do really cool and magical things. And I currently do this as a senior product manager at Twitter. My team looks after all of the tweets that exist outside of Twitter. So these are tweets that are in articles or in websites or apps. And together with our products, we reach more than 1 billion people every day. So it's like 1 in 7 people comes across one of these tweets. So the reach is just unreal. And as a product manager at Twitter, there are broadly 3 things that I'm responsible for doing. So the first one is delivering for the customer, which is all about knowing deeply what people need and who the group of people is that I'm responsible for looking after. So that's done through a lot of research and data science and asking all sorts of big questions about what we're trying to achieve. Then next up, we're responsible for actually getting those needs met and delivered. So actually designing the products and developing them with the team to bring that all to life and then launch it out into the world where it's seen by loads of different people. Next up, we're here to facilitate for the team. So my team is one of many teams at Twitter, and we need to work with all of our sibling teams, make sure that we're sharing ideas, we're collaborating on things, and then also facilitate for the way that my team works with senior leadership, that we're building the right thing for the company, that we're contributing in the most meaningful way, really facilitating sideways and upwards and downwards. And then last but not least, we're responsible for building a better company. So doing stuff that helps not just our immediate customers or our immediate team, but everyone else around us. So an example of that is that I run the mentorship program for product managers at Twitter, where we connect there are about 250 product managers at Twitter. So introduce them to each other, create relationships between them, and create these connections that strengthens the team. So I am a product manager at Twitter, but I didn't just know one day that this is what I wanted to do. I've tried a bunch of different stuff along the way, and I've tried them with varying levels of success while I was figuring out the stuff that I wanted to do most. When I grew up, I want to be a blank, I've had 1,000 different answers for that question over the years. So with all of that in mind, I want to talk to you today about chaos and career change and career course correction, and how all of that stuff is completely okay, why it's okay to fail, what you can learn from it, and how changing a mindset about failure can be a really powerful thing to do. And I want to do this by telling some stories, sharing some perspectives, and a bit of my journey along the way with all of you. So let's start by time traveling to the before times, the pre-pandemic times, and time travel with me to Barcelona in about 2015. I was there for the weekend with my mom and with my sister and my cousin. And it was this really hot and sunny and sticky day in the super European city. And I was there because a few months earlier, I had moved to London from South Africa, from Pretoria, where I grew up. And this was one of the first times that I'd gotten a chance to see my family since I had moved. And it was this really great chance to just take a step back and think about what it had taken to get there and like what I had done, because I don't think I quite realized it at the time when I decided to go to London. So my mother and I are really good travel partners. She is a mathematician. She's also a lecturer at Tux. And through that, she has gone to a lot of conferences. There's always like an academic conference that she would go to in the before times, in the pre-pandemic times. And I sometimes went with her to these conferences as like an accompanying person. And those are these memories that I just love so much. Going to Turkey or Australia or Germany or these like fun places. And in doing that, we developed these rituals. And my favorite one of these by far is this ritual of having a cocktail with a view from a high place in whichever city we went to. I remember sitting in Hong Kong, watching this like skyline of lights on all the buildings light up, or in Amsterdam, we climbed up to the top of this tower and we were both giggling because there was glass that we were both afraid of standing on. Like lovely memories that come with these things. Every one of these cocktails has a story. And so in Barcelona, we found this incredible spot for a view. And what I love about doing these like cocktails with a view is that it gives you this sense of perspective. There's a chance to take a step back, see what your place is in everything, help you understand that like context of how you fit in. And it also just like removes you from the day-to-day like small sweaty stuff that can stress you out. It just helpful to take a step back. So in Barcelona, we found this beautiful spot and it was along the water. It was after a really like long, hot day. And it was this restaurant that had this view over the harbor and it had that like really nice restaurant mist that looks so nice when it's so hot outside. And so we stopped for a drink over there and had the kind of conversation that you have when you haven't seen your mom in a while. And she like asks all the right kind of questions about all the difficult things that you've been doing, and really had a nice chat. And it was good to realize that moving to London was really difficult. I did it on my own. I had no idea what to expect, didn't know what was getting myself into. But what I did know is that I was chasing this idea of technology, of building technology. And I knew that London was a city like San Francisco or like New York, where I would find other people who were going after the same thing. And finding a job from South Africa online when nobody believed that I was going to do the thing and move to London was really difficult. Like I applied to about 100 different places in London trying to find a job. So that was scary. And then finding an apartment as well was a very scary thing to do, like choosing a neighborhood, doing it all on my own, very scary. So that was tough. But then knowing and recognizing that I was doing it for a reason, for something that I really believe in, was really helpful to like come to terms with all of that. So we were chatting about this with my mom and then noticed this like buoy that was floating in the water. And it wasn't like a regular like round red and white one. It was this like white buoy with a round base. And there was a man standing on it and he's got his hands like behind his back and he's just staring up into the sky and he's just floating around and he's on this like choppy water. So he's being thrown backwards and forwards and sideways, but he's just like hanging out, totally content, just staring up into the world. And so we spoke about how this floating man like stays stable in what he's aiming towards, even though he's being thrown around. And we spoke about how knowing why I wanted to go was like staring up at the sky, but the experience of going and just being shaken around a bit, like doing all these stressful things, was like being thrown about the water. And so we spoke about these experiences and a lot of time had passed and then suddenly it was nighttime and a harbor man was still being thrown around side to side. But instead of now looking up at the clouds, he was now looking up at the stars. And I love space, I love stars, I love everything about this. And there's also this concept in product design of a North Star as a way of expressing a vision of something that you're aiming towards, this set of like guiding principles that help you look towards something. And I'm a product manager now, but before I was a product manager, I was a product designer. And I remember we loved this concept of having a North Star because when you're building for like millions of people and you're in a team of more than 100 people, you've got to have one thing that you're all looking at that helps keep everyone grounded in the thing that you're aiming towards. So we had these North Stars to kind of explain this vision that we're aiming towards. And it also takes its form of like a design system. So at Twitter, we've got this design system called Horizon, which is this like one thing that everyone can reference and everyone can look at. It's all really stable. Everyone can really see it as this like North Star. But as a designer, as anyone that works in tech, there's so much change at the same time. There's change in the people that you're working with, there's change in the technology that you're using, there's change in priorities and requirements, like all sorts of things that change, but that gets grounded in something that stays stable in our design system, in the North Star that we're aiming towards. So North Stars are really helpful in something like design, but can we apply a North Star in our personal lives or in our careers? Like, is there a way of applying this concept of a guiding set of principles that withstands all the day-to-day change? So that's the question that I want to ask, is like, can we apply a North Star to your career as a tool to help you find more of the stuff that makes you happy, more of the stuff that you love? And I think something like this doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It doesn't just reveal itself. It's something that you've got to look for and understand what it is to you. And I don't think any of us really just know what our personal North Star would be without spending a whole lot of time to think about it and talk about it and asking difficult questions to try and get to it. Like what the thing is that you care about or love, or how you want to spend your time every day. So thinking about North Stars brings me back to a trip that I took with a friend of mine. Also, shortly after I arrived in the UK, we wanted to go to Stonehenge, the collection of like ancient rocks that stand up, and see what all the fuss is about. So rented a car, drove out to Stonehenge, went with a friend of mine, and like normal days are filled with lots of conversations about like ways to understand things better or like communicate through something, share an idea. But some days have these really important standout conversations. And this was one of those days that had like a deep, meaningful conversation. We parked the car up, took a really lovely walk through some fields of flowers on the way to Stonehenge, and then ended up stopping for a picnic with a view of the whole place. And it was just like a really nice landscape, good reason to like start chatting. And so we started talking about, okay, but what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do in a few years, in 10 years, in 15 years? Like, what are these things that you want to aim towards? And I'd been thinking about it a bunch, but I hadn't put it into words until having that conversation. That this thing that I wanted to do was enable people to be this like better version of themselves by using technology. I knew that I found a lot of pleasure in making stuff and building things and creating. And I knew that this like power of technology was something really cool that could help people be this incredibly better version of themselves. That really spoke to me deep down. This way that you can like augment people's capabilities to do like more cool things is a really attractive idea. So speaking about it with my friend really helped me put that into words and helped me understand what shape of the thing that was that I wanted to do more of. And it made me realize that unknowingly I had used that North Star to make a decision about my job at the time without quite realizing it. It was difficult to get a job from South Africa. Like I just applied to loads of places online. And then when I got a job at an agency, I was like, this is really cool. But then I realized that once I was doing the job and once I was in London, it wasn't quite what I wanted to be doing. Like I wanted to be enabling people to do cool things with technology, but the work that we were doing was really helping founders create prototypes that they could use to raise money from investors. And that wasn't quite enabling people to be better in a way that I had wanted to. So my friend and I spoke about how you could use that North Star and apply it to like making career choices a lot easier to make, and how it had made that like much clearer to take a next step forward. So we then spoke about like, okay, let's then map out like everything else that comes next after that. Like let's map out more of the career instead of just that one decision. So started making a diagram, drew this on the back of the ticket to get into Stonehenge. And that's now what I want to show you. So I'm super quick going to open up Zoom and start presenting my screen. Let's hope this works. Can not join with audio. And I'm going to present my screen. And could you allow me to present or make me the host of the meeting so I can present? Excellent, thank you. I'm still getting a message that says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, give me 2 seconds.
Cool.
Try now.
Nice, yeah, that's perfect.
All right, so we should be able to see some stars now.
Yep, you can see them.
All right, so I started drawing this diagram, starting with my North Star in this top right corner is the thing that we're aiming towards, so like aiming to get into that top right corner. This would be like the optimal point of happiness of doing the stuff that I really wanted to do, satisfaction of doing something I cared about, happiness with the people that I got to work with, like all the good things, aiming towards that top corner. And then we also spoke a little bit about this concept of magnetic north, something that feels like north, it's close to north, but it's really pulling you a little bit in the wrong direction, like it's pulling you a little bit off center. So this concept of magnetic north was the stuff that like detracted you away from what was true north, the stuff that is not quite aligned with what you want to do, but you don't necessarily notice it at the time. So I've used this to like map out the bits of my career. Starting out, when I was finishing high school, I knew that I loved art and technology, and Tux was a really obvious choice of university for me because my mom worked there at the time, so a really great place to start. And at Tux, I had a couple of options of like where to focus, like what do I want to start with? And I remember there being like a very design focused, like information design course, or there was like a very computer science focused version, or multimedia, which felt like a perfect middle ground between the two, or something like electronic engineering. And I ended up picking BIS multimedia. And I think I made perfect choice, really, really great course, loved it. It gave me a really great set of skills that would turn out to be super, super valuable. But I think what I loved most about it was this chance to get to try out a bunch of different things. And it wasn't always easy. I remember, especially in like the first 2 years, feeling like a lot of my peers were ahead of me. I didn't have a chance to take IT at school because my all girls high school didn't offer it as a subject at the time. And so I felt like a lot of my peers, often the like peers that were men, had already done this stuff and they just seemed so much more comfortable with it. So I often felt like I didn't know how to do the cos stuff because I was a woman, without realizing that like I didn't know how to do the cos stuff because I hadn't learned how to do it yet, and it's really difficult. Like, so I think projecting a lot of this stuff that wasn't necessarily true, but I really felt like I wasn't as advanced as a lot of the people. So it wasn't always easy. Felt like I was missing some of the things, but still very happy that I chose to do that thing. And then while I was in my second year, I got a design internship that I started doing, which felt really aligned with my North Star. I hadn't like known much about design at the time, but felt like I really loved it because it was working in tech, but it was something that was really creative, and doing this internship was really wonderful because it helped me decide that that's what I wanted to be doing more of once I graduated. But the internship was like very not well paid and had a whole bunch of problems with it, which I'll get back to in a second. Oh, well, actually currently right now. So in my third year, I went back to that same agency, and I got a part-time job there while I was studying. I spaced out some of the last modules that I needed to finish over like a year instead of over the last 6 months that I had to do. And doing that let me work part-time while I was studying, which was a cool way of like getting industry experience while still finishing up my degree and like understanding how some of that stuff was applied day to day. And I gained a whole lot of experience. It felt like I was facing north, but then there was this thing that like detracted from it in the wrong direction, because I would create like pixel perfect designs in Photoshop back when we were using Photoshop to do like website design, and then hand them over to a client and then never see it ever again. And so I felt like I was really disconnected from how a person would actually end up using the stuff. I also wasn't working closely with the developers or the engineers. I was just sort of handing something over and then I would never see it again. So that felt like it wasn't aligned with my North Star, like wasn't quite in the right place. And then going even further in the wrong direction, this place also had all of the women in one room that were doing design work and all of the men in another room that were doing the development work. And that was just like not acceptable. And I felt frustrated because I was coming from a multimedia degree where I could do both, but I was being weirdly limited by my gender and literally being put into a room, which was making me focus on just like one part of my skill set. And I was also frustrated to learn that I was being paid much less than my colleagues, like people who had studied the same thing, that were doing a similar like level of job, like we'd studied together and then gotten these jobs together, and that I was being like paid 40% less than them. So that was really frustrating. And I raised it, I spoke to my boss about it a bunch, and it just didn't change, and nothing changed. And eventually I just invested a whole lot of time and energy into it and ended up fighting against something that felt like a brick wall. So I decided to move on, and that it wasn't worth trying to change this whole company from the inside as a junior employee. And it makes me think of this book that I read. Please forgive me, I'm about to swear loads. This book is called The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck. And the author talks about how if you really care about something, you're prepared to give a fuck about it. And you've also only got so many fucks in your fuck bucket that you are prepared to give until you run out of them. So you need to decide where and why you might choose to give one of your very precious fucks. So at this point in my career, I learned a very important lesson, that I only have so many fucks to give. And I needed to be more thoughtful about how I choose my battles. Like I could still be there trying to fight against the culture of that company. So I made my point clear. I respectfully communicated how I felt about the situation, and I drew a line, decided to leave the company, decided to use my energy to fight for equality more effective in other ways. And at this point, I gave him my notice and I decided to go to London, go chase technology. I'd always wanted to do a semester abroad. And so this was my version of a semester abroad, like right after graduating, deciding to go to London for a little bit. So going to London was really difficult, as I've mentioned, but what it gave me in terms of opportunities and connections and this environment to thrive was more than I could have dreamed of. I think it was way more than I was expecting. It was cool, like leap all the way closer to my North Star. And then when I arrived, I worked at a couple more places, including that incubator that I mentioned. And all of these sort of brought me deeper into the world of startups and this like London tech scene that was really cool. But I didn't always agree with some of the projects that I was working on or some of the clients that we were working with. So some of them were quite like towards my North Star, but some of them were in the wrong direction. And then at this point, I discovered hackathons, and I started doing more and more of them because it just made me really happy. So hackathon, a bunch of people get together, you sort of form teams with people you don't really know, and then come up with an idea together, build it, and then present it at the end of the weekend. Really loved it. And then based on that, I got to try out a whole bunch of stuff, try out working with a lot of different people. And then through that, I started putting more thought and effort into communicating what kind of work I'd like to be doing and communicating how I did my best work, like what sort of environments I thrived in. And then looked for ways that I could do more of that in my own roles. And through that, I got to the point of leaving my current job and opening up a consulting company, which was just a way to do contracts with companies that I really wanted to work with. So I was doing like somewhere between product development, like a little bit of coming up with ideas, a little bit of writing some code, a little bit of design, and working with a whole bunch of startups to bring those ideas to life. So did some stuff with startups, and then that led to contracts with the Open Space Agency, which was really cool. And then that led to a contract with NASA, which was the coolest thing that I've done in my career so far, really pleased with it. And then led to a contract with Twitter as well. So all of these sort of built on each other, with hackathons like fueling the connections in between. And that's all led me to joining Twitter, where I am really now. And so I'm really glad that all these things have led me in that path. But now I want to talk about the stuff that I didn't do and the like so-called failures along the way. In high school, I did a lot of these competitions. This one was to design a model Formula One car. There's a 16-year-old Eleanor in that. And at that point, because of that, I really wanted to become an electronic engineer. I was like, I'm going to build robots. They're going to be great. But I chose multimedia instead. So technically speaking, I failed to become an electronic engineer. But instead of studying something where I know I would have ended up bored and unhappy, I got to do this cool combination of like computer science and game design with a whole bunch of other stuff with this really wonderful creative group of people. And we got to like make games, and we ended up winning the Microsoft Imagine Cup with our third year project, which was an incredible feeling. And failing to become an electronic engineer opened up all sorts of wonderful opportunities that I wouldn't have dreamed of. Like part of the Imagine Cup, we won a Skype award of like collaboration, and like it was really, really cool. So opened up doors that maybe wouldn't have been opened otherwise. And then when I worked at that agency in South Africa, I could have stuck around and worked my way up to be creative director, because at the time I really wanted that. I thought that was my North Star that I was aiming towards, but I didn't do that. So technically I failed as a creative designer in a hotshot agency. And instead I moved to London, found myself with opportunities bigger than my wildest dreams. In London, I could have focused my time on moving more towards being a developer, spending more time coding. So technically I failed to become a software engineer, but instead I found that I love doing Swiss Army knife much more, where you can like do lots of bits and pieces instead, and all of the product thinking and the user experience design and the interaction design and the front end development. So I found a niche where I love doing all of these things together. And around this time, I discovered hackathons, where I just absolutely fell in love with trying different things and discovering which ones I loved most, got loads of exposure to the places that I might want to work and the people that would go on to open so many doors for me. The really tall guy in the middle is Andreas, and the woman all around the side next to me is Carolina. And this was the day that I met them both. I now work with Andreas at Twitter. He's how I got a job at Twitter. He introduced me to the team over there. And a couple of weeks ago, we went on holiday with him. So friends for life and opportunities into jobs, like, yeah, hackathons are incredible for opening up things like that. And I think building technology is as much about the tools that you use as it is about the dynamics of people working together and how you get to know them like that. So hackathons are a fantastic place to explore that. And they're places where I found colleagues and friends and opportunities, and I've just gained so much from hackathons. So I would recommend. And people remember you from hackathons and come up with opportunities. Like this one, I went to a hackathon and then got an invitation to speak at HackCon in Europe, which was cool. Or getting a chance to interview an actual real life astronaut because someone heard how much I like space because I tweeted about it at a hackathon. It was, yeah, all hackathons and Twitter and wonderful things. Getting back into the things that I failed at, when I was working at this incubator in London, I mentioned that I was frustrated by some of the clients that I was taking on. So you could say that I failed to change the way that a company chose their clients and took on people because I decided to leave. Or you could say that I started choosing my own client list and succeeded at like picking the people that I actually wanted to work with and do projects that I really believed in, like this cool 3D printed telescope that ended up at the White House, which is so cool. Back when Obama was at the White House, I might know. So I could have done 1,000 different things. I failed to do a million different things, but instead I decided to focus on the things that I did choose to do and the ones that I worked really hard to achieve, and then shared those things with people around me because I was proud of what it had taken. And then those people shared cool opportunities back with me. Some fun awards and some fun lists and talking at things which have been really fun. It's a very embarrassing but quite cool magazine that was printed. And so getting back to this view of the career, it's this like pretty abstract view. It's my own little constellation that points towards my North Star. And I think you can like abstract out a career into a couple of lines, but there's a lot of nuance in it as well. Like out here, a job at Twitter may just be a straight line, but if you look at it through like a telescope, it's much more interesting. Like every day is made up of these choices, and within one role, you might decide to move backwards and forwards along lines. Like projects come and go, teams change, like processes that you're using don't stay the same. So I joined Twitter as a product design contractor. And I had this huge weight of imposter syndrome on my shoulders. I feel like someone would find out that I wasn't qualified to do this. Like I don't have a design degree, like I'm technically not qualified to do this job. And I was really scared that someone would realize that I'd snuck my way into Twitter somehow without earning it. And they would tell me that I don't belong to be there at all. But then I built up my confidence by doing the work that I was doing. There are some fantastic groups within Twitter. There's a women in product group, there's a women of design group, women in user experience. Like there's all sorts of these like really fantastic groups that really helped me build up my confidence in this. And I started feeling more comfortable. I started exploring a little bit outside of my direct day-to-day, and found out that I was really enjoying the strategic thinking and some of the feature definition. And so I started doing more of that stuff. And after a while, I realized that I was stepping on our product manager's toes a little bit and wondering what it would be like to do some of this work all the time. And so she left a few months later, and that opened up this opportunity to try out the role while we were hiring for it. And I left at that and started doing both the product design role and the product management role day to day. Exhausted myself in the process, because I spent half a year doing both roles at the same time, which was a fun challenge that I would recommend to no one. And then made a decision to move into product management full time. And I'm so happy with this work that I get to do. It feels like I get to touch every bit of the product development process and work with people from all sorts of different backgrounds and all sorts of roles in many different countries. And it's all about like orchestrating it and coordinating it. And it's a role that's so much more aligned with my North Star than I had any idea about back when I was deciding what to study in Pretoria. Like, I just had no idea if this was a job that existed. And to be fair, like when I was in high school, this company didn't exist, this role didn't exist. There's a lot of new stuff that has been created between now and then. So I think change is really constant, and that's a sentence that we hear so often that it doesn't really have much meaning. But we see change everywhere. It's in technology, it's in the projects that we're working on, in people around us, change in the team that we work with, change in where we live, and it's just this defining characteristic of how we lead our lives. But that's exactly how it's supposed to be. And if you're ready for that change, then you can do wonders with the change. There's a story that I always think about when I think about how things change, and it's of the vinegar tasters, these three really old men that are huddled around a massive pot of vinegar, and they need to taste it to make sure that it's fermented properly. And so the first one like takes a cup and dunks it in and like cringes because it's really sour and horrible. And the second one does the same, and he takes a sip and he just pulls a face because it's really sour and awful. And so the third vinegar taster takes his cup and he dips it in and he brings it to his lips and he takes a sip and he smiles. And the other two are like, "Are you mad? This is horrible vinegar." And he says, "I am happy that it tastes the way that it's supposed to because it's fermented properly." And I've held on to this story over the years. I keep coming back to it whenever I think that something feels wrong or difficult because there's so much change involved. I'll be complaining about something when I realize like, oh, it's the vinegar tasters. This is how it's supposed to be. When a product problem is really complicated or difficult and loads of people involved of it, I think about the vinegar tasters and remember this is what it's supposed to taste like. That's why I like doing this sort of stuff. If I feel nervous before I speak to a group of people, I just remember like that's exactly how it's supposed to feel. That's okay. I remember when I made that decision to go from product designer to product manager, how incredibly nervous I was about everything that would change. Also, when I started on a new team during the pandemic, like I was so nervous about getting to know people, about getting started on this new problem space that I knew nothing about. I was feeling so much imposter syndrome that I had no idea what I was doing and people would immediately notice. But I knew that things would be changing, and I knew that a lot of the ways that I work day to day would change. I'd face new challenges and new problems, and just taking a moment to myself to recognize that and just count to 10 and mentally prepare myself to focus on understanding what's changing rather than being terrified by why it's going to change, because things are going to change and that's okay. They're supposed to. It's the vinegar tasters. And I think there are a lot of things, big ones and small ones, that are going to try and destabilize us, like the water in that harbor in Barcelona that tries to like knock people around. And the secret is to keep your eyes on where you're going. And unless something knocks you over entirely, then to sweat some more of the small stuff and build up some resilience against it. Yeah, I agree. Imposter syndrome is a total drag and it gets all of us. Okay, one quick story to share with you before I wrap up. I think it's no secret that I have a soft spot for space in my heart, as you've seen from all the stars that are still up on the screen. A while ago, I was reading this AMA and Ask Me Anything on Reddit by this Canadian astronaut, Chris Hadfield, and he had come back down to Earth after being the commander of the International Space Station after a 6-month stint, and he'd written this book, The Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, which is really good. I would totally recommend it. And this book has shaped a lot of the way that I think about North Stars. And he had an answer in this AMA, and he said, decide in your heart of hearts what really excites and challenges you, and start moving your life in that direction. And that's this idea of a North Star, like trying to figure out what excites you and challenges you. And then he went on to say, every decision you make, from what you eat to what you do with your time tonight, turns you into who you are tomorrow and the day after that. But this North Star isn't this like shiny, unattainable thing in the distance. It's something that needs to become part of your everyday lifestyle and part of how you think about the world, part of how you make every micro decision in your day. whether you choose to let change get to you or not. They say that if you eat meat in your whole lifetime, you can eat up to an entire elephant, but it's never done in one go, right? Like it's always you choose when you're going to eat a steak, or you choose if we're just going to get some elephant nuggets, or you choose if you're not going to eat any meat at all. It's your choice, and you make those choices every day, and over time those choices add up and can become an elephant. So if you're making these tiny everyday decisions based on your own set of guiding principles, you might not get exactly where you thought you'd be, but you'll definitely be doing stuff that suit you and doing them in a profession that you believe in. And so this stuff really resonated with me, and I was at that hackathon and I tweeted it, and lo and behold, Chris Hadfield himself replies to my tweet. And if there's ever a game-changing moment of when I was like, oh, totally understand Twitter and really believe in it, that was the moment. And then fast forward a couple of months, this journalist contacts me through Twitter, sends me a direct message, and somehow they saw my tweet and they're asking me, would I like to interview Chris Hadfield live on Al Jazeera, the news channel? And of course I said yes immediately. And then based on that, I ended up going to the Open Space Agency and then working with NASA. Like all of these things were really intertwined as part of the journey. And when I was speaking to Chris Hadfield, I ended up asking him a question directly related to my own North Star. And I was so excited after that question. I was like asking him, should I start my own thing, or should I like work at a like people enabling technology company like Twitter? And I don't even remember exactly what he said, but I did very seriously pursue getting a job at Twitter after that. And I chose Twitter as this like way to work towards my North Star. And through it, I've tried like 3 different careers within Twitter now, like lots of different jobs. And it's led me down paths that have been much more aligned with my North Star than I could have believed. Yeah, so I chose to be there, chose to be here for that. And each of you have chosen to be where you are now for many different reasons, very aligned with what your North Star is. And something about being here today in this Grace's Girls meeting spoke to you about wanting to be here. I think having a cocktail with a view is something that gives you a perspective, and also going to events like this, hearing ideas from people is also a really good way to get perspective and think about where you want to be next, what your place is, and what we're doing and all of these things. That story of the Barcelona harbor man and like how he shakes around in the change is something that stuck with me for a really long time, but only like as part of the research that I did when I first wrote this talk was looking up this Barcelona harbor man. Like I'd previously known nothing about what he looks like. And I found some photos of him and discovered the best little secret. This is our harbor man. He's standing really stable in his feet and he's looking up at the sky. He's got his hands behind his back. But I discovered that he's holding on to something. He's holding a star, his own little North Star that he's holding on to. So take a look inside yourself and find what that star is to hold on to. Stand firmly on the ground, finding stability in yourself, embracing all the change that surrounds you, and then holding on to that North Star really tight and keeping your eyes on that beautiful place that you're going, one tiny decision at a time. And that is all from me.
Wow, I'm going to try to keep my video on. My internet is very unstable today, but I cannot imagine anybody to speak at this inaugural lecture better suited than you. I mean, you've been so incredibly brave. Just congratulations, going out there and just risking for your own passion. It's incredible. I hope that Anik shares this with all of the tech students that are female. Because I feel like this is just incredible advice. Well done. Congratulations on such an amazing talk. And I really love what you said, that when you started your degree, you didn't know what job you could do. You didn't know what they would be. And I feel like what I find exciting about educating people in tech, all people, is that we are preparing them for futures that we have no idea what it's going to look like. And that's really exciting about our field, I think. And also terrifying when you're trying to prepare students for a world that you can't even imagine. So I do want to give people some time to just type out questions, and I will read the questions, or you can read them yourself. But it really was amazing to have you. Thank you. I know that Anique is planning on giving you a small token of our appreciation.
Yeah.
I was trying to convince her to make enamel badges that says things like bite bitch and front end female, but she was not on board with that, sadly. I'm still working for the badges. But I would also, while everybody is typing their questions, hopefully, like to take a moment to thank Anique for organizing this, because she says that we had conversations, but actually she came to me and said, this is what I want to do. And I said, okay, cool. Let's make that happen now. Let's do that. So this was absolutely her brainchild, her passion. It has been incredible to be a part of this facilitating and to make it happen. And I believe so much this group is needed. And hopefully we can inspire more females to get into and at least stay in our tech degrees. Yeah, just wow. My question, if I may take the first one, involves how would you describe to people feeling your North Star? When you talk about like the magnetic North and the true North, in your heart of hearts, I mean, I can understand your decision leaving a company that pays women 40% less, yes, that you should do. But I'm sure that there were a bunch of decisions in between that and where you are now. And how did you know when you were making the right choice? That is my question.
Yeah, the thing that I've done whenever I'm starting to get that like spidey sense, I'm like, is this magnetic north? Is this pulling me in the wrong direction? Is to like think back over the last month or 2 months, and then think about the moments that I was feeling my absolute best in that time. Like, what are the days that I've got like amazing focus and I'm really proud of what I've done? And then think about like, what's the thing that caused that feeling? And then do the same thing for like, what are the days that I was feeling like I wasn't really enjoying this, or feeling really anxious, or feeling really stressed out, and then trying to find patterns amongst that stuff. And that's helped me notice like when I'm veering off a little bit to the left, if there's more of the stuff that's making me feel anxious than the stuff that's making me feel really good. And then trying to design my next 2 months to have like more of the stuff that I really enjoy and less of the stuff that I don't. And having that is like sometimes a conversation with my manager of like, hey, I want to do less of this stuff. Can you help me like take it off my plate or something like that?
Fantastic. Congratulations again. Am I still muted? It says I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that was amazing. Incredible. Wow.
Yeah, of
Awesome.
course.
I see we have questions coming up.
Yeah, there are any questions in the chat?
Okay, Prof. Furry left, and no other questions for you. I'm sure that we'll be circulating this widely.
Yeah.
Again, first lecture, I am humbled and amazed at what Anique and you have managed to put together. Congratulations, both of you. It is.
I feel like it was all
work.
Eleanor, but cool.
You had the idea. Yeah, you had the idea.
It looks like we have a question from Adiyang.
Oh, good. Yes, please. Would you like to speak?
Hi, hello everybody. Yes, I would.
Hey.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
My question is, how do you stay so focused on your North Star? Because I'm pretty sure like you've got friends and other peers that are probably like sticking to something and doing it within the required time, and they just seem to like be having everything going, according to the expected, timeline. How do you not feel like, okay, I think I'm getting old now. I need to just like stop and do one thing and just settle down without like feeling like, how do you not try to compare, like, how do you stay so focused on the North Star despite like whatever influences that could be outside and people's opinions and stuff?
Yeah, I hear you. It's like one thing is you can see what everyone else is doing and comparing yourself to like the timelines that they're doing it in, and then how that feels for what you're doing, and then keeping really focused on where you want to go. And I think the truth is that like even I veered away from it, like especially over the last 2 years since we've been in a pandemic. There's been decisions that I'm like, well, my North Star is saying I really want to do this thing, but also we're like in a pandemic, so that's going to shift the way that I'm deciding about things. And I think another perspective there is when I think about comparing myself to other people, I always have to remind myself that I'm seeing all the details of my life, all of the like happy stuff, all the nitty gritty stuff, like all the hairy details, whereas I'm only seeing a very high level perspective of someone else's life. And there's probably a lot of stuff that's just under the surface for them that I wouldn't really know about or understand. So my perspective of what they're doing is a very like glazed over, shiny, sparkly, iced perspective. So I think reminding myself of that like my detailed day-to-day is very different from their highlights reel. And like, it's okay to veer away from your North Star. The idea is that it's far away in the future and you're just aiming towards it. So it's fine if you take a bit of a long route to get there. It's totally okay.
Again, thank you. I think what you're saying, that it seems like what that whole answer can be boiled down to, know thyself and really pay attention to what brings you joy and what aligns you to your own values, I think. And maybe it is a revolutionary act for women to look at what they want and what their values are in terms of deciding their careers. I know that it's not something that people have been able to do for very long. So let's hope that we can empower more women to think about their careers in that way. And I think you're an incredible role model. Well done. Yeah, this was great. Thanks, Anit, so much for having me involved.
Can I quickly say something?
Sure.
Just before we finish, Eleanor, I just want to say thank you so much. Letitia has beautifully articulated it, but it was so inspiring and so much more than I was hoping for. I will be circulating this very widely because it's definitely something people need to hear, and it's just great to see where you're at, not just like what you're doing and achieving, but just the attitude with which you're approaching your career is. It's beautiful to see, and it's refreshing. It's a refreshing perspective on working and jobs and passions and all of these things. So thank you so much for taking the time to be available and share, and always be available for the multimedia degree because of
Very much so.
past. So that's all from me. Sorry, Letitia, back to you.
I don't know, I'm done. I've used all of my articulation now. Like, I have nothing smart to say. So you can all please go and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thank you for attending. Our next talk will be next month. We'll be hosting these monthly. Our next speaker would be Andri Nell from Cambridge University Press. She runs their accessibility and online program in Cambridge. And she just won an award from the Independent Publishers Association for her work as an environmental digital publisher. So that is our next speaker next month. We'll be circulating their bio, and I hope to see all of you there. Bring friends, that would be great. So Anik has less admin to do with distributing the talk afterwards. Thank you so much, folks. This was great. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.